Get started. So I'll call the meeting to order and ask for the approval of the minutes from our meeting of July 23rd.
So moved. Second?
Moved by Rhett, and then seconded by Norm, sorry.
It's all good, you can call me anything you want.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. All right, Anna sent us out a very comprehensive sort of update of where we are with regard to our housing policy, why we feel like we need to revisit that, because the pipeline of new applicants is just building because they're not coming to us with their projects, and that's an issue, that's a problem that we need to rectify. But we are, I think, all in agreement that we need a housing policy review in terms of the marketplace and the needs of Monroe County for housing, so that we can of benefit there and in alliance with what the county needs. Mm-hmm. So we'll look at what the research should entail. You want to go ahead and add on
Certainly.
a little bit to that?
Thank you. And after I speak for just a minute, I'll toss it to, well, and I want to open it up and have some dialogue here and discussion. And we're also going to talk about what should go into our request for proposals or request for qualifications as we embark on a housing study for COMIDA. But in my email message on Friday, I noted that we haven't received any applications for new housing projects since instituting the new policy, and it hasn't been an extraordinarily long period of time, but we have learned of at least 7 different multifamily housing projects in different parts of the county that are on hold because as the developers or the project owners have claimed in some instances of the change in our policy. And there's been some speculation that, is COMIDA really supportive of housing projects, or is COMIDA shutting down the notion that, housing is something that the agency is supportive of. There are, 5 of the 7 projects we've got data on, including, 700 units with a capital investment collectively of $250 million, and estimated number of construction jobs about 1,085.
I was just going to say
those projects.
That Adam too was very concerned. This is a lot of
right
growth in the region for us, and it's all just sitting there, and people not knowing is the housing policy going to change, or is it what. Right. So it's a missed opportunity for all.
Right. So we called this meeting and wanted to have this discussion because the county executive reached out to me and said, hey, what's going on with your housing policy? So,
reached out to me too.
yes, and he spoke to our chair. Right. And I see Norm's gonna have a comment, so I'm gonna keep this quick, I'm sorry. So summary to the changes we approved in June. Housing applications may require review by the board at 2 meetings. I think that's still reasonable. We revised the policy such that the set aside applies to the number of units rather than square footage. We added that the set aside must be a representative cross section, and we gave broad discretion to the board to waive the set aside requirement. The board had previously could waive the requirement if the project was in a highly distressed or blighted area. So the broad discretion was a shift. And then changes proposed for today's conversation for discussion. Rolling back the 20% to 10% as we await the outcome of a study, a data-driven independent analysis. Which staff had recommended initially.
I'm gonna first.
Okay. Staff had initially recommended let's leave the policy the way it is until we receive guidance from outside experts, as is the case with other IDAs statewide that have informed and cogent housing policies. Those are typically informed by an outside assessment or study. Affordable in our policy today is 60 to 80% of area median income.
And it's still sitting there at 20%.
Yes, the 20% set aside. So we're proposing today that we
Open up the range of
open up the
AMI.
range of AMI.
Mhm.
And we should restrict the policy to projects receiving a pilot agreement because of the ability and practicality of monitoring compliance. And at the board's discretion, we're recommending that, remedy available upon violation of the policy would be termination of the pilot agreement and recapture of the benefits. With that, let's have a conversation.
Could I-
You all saw my email, I'm
Just
sorry.
a
Pat.
comment before Norm blows up, just a thought because Joe's not here and I have a lot
Should
of
be here
respect.
any minute. Yeah, he
should,
texted
yes.
us.
What's that?
He'll be here any minute.
Okay. After listening to Joe's discussions for the past year plus, couple of years, and then hearing this, that the projects aren't coming in, and it appears because of, us going to the 20%, I'm just kind of scratching my head about that, because I think Joe knows, what he's talking about. So I'm a little bit confused by that.
Yeah, and we can only speculate, but based on the information that we're receiving through the grapevine, is that the projects are on hold because the developers see no benefit in coming before COMIDA, and they're saying that the projects are not viable without benefits, and so they're reevaluating.
It's interesting.
And the reason we've had some conversations about workforce housing, and we've had a lot of conversations about what defines affordable. It'd be great to have some expertise and some guidance in hand from a consultant about what swim lane should COMIDA swim in, regarding affordability, given the current dynamics of Monroe County's economy. And we're in a point of economic transition at the moment. Things are changing. I mean, there's some of these projects are adaptive reuse projects, looking at buildings that are vacant and dilapidated and perhaps used to be commercial and now are being shifted to housing. So I think that there are important things for us to take into consideration that a consultant might be able to provide some guidance on. And with that, I would love to hear what Norman has to say.
Comment. Are we fickled?
It would appear
Yeah,
as such.
are we fickled? Because I sat here back in June and I said, we should wait until the study's done before we make these changes. I sat here and I said it, but no, let's do it now. We have to do it based on anecdotals. Now we're finding out that, guess what? No one can do it. And and they were doing it when we had it before. So
10% was working.
we seem like we're fickle. If we're gonna go back. And I strongly stated that we should wait till we get a study before we make any changes.
And I think staff agreed to do.
Yeah.
We did.
Yeah.
Are you hearing through the grapevine that if you went back to 10%, all these projects would move forward?
More or less. We have heard, we understand that the way that the policy was written prior to the change was not a mitigating factor for these particular projects.
So parking the study aside for a second, which you should do the study. Do you want the projects moving forward or not?
Well, we need more housing in the county.
Yeah, I'm just asking, it's an open-ended
And
question.
1,000 construction jobs.
And if you are actually getting reassurances that these projects are gonna move forward, your decision is, do you want to do it or not? Do you want them to get going?
And
Or
they're not getting going right now, that's the problem, they're all
Right.
stalled.
But I guess my point is, because you don't really, we don't really know, is this really true information? If what you're saying is, oh yeah, you go back to 10%, these projects are moving forward, then you have a solid piece of information to say,
Right.
And
Why
then we
don't we-
have a study done and it talks about what Joe's been talking about. It talks about we should be 15-20%. How's it make us look, going from 10 to 20 back to 10?
What I'm hoping that we receive in a study is some guidance and framework that isn't, that goes beyond just a blanket percentage of affordable and percentage of AMI, that's more nuanced than that, and helps COMIDA define what is middle income housing for Monroe County based on the current dynamics of Monroe County's economy. And where that helps us answer the question of, like, what is a profitable, what's an extraordinarily profitable housing development for a developer that doesn't require incentive from an IDA, and what's the type of housing that's needed in the county that is not profitable for developers right off the bat, that does warrant a little push or incentive from an industrial development agency in order to support the workforce and economic development projects. Because site selectors, when they're making decisions about projects, they're also looking at communities' housing inventory, and they're saying, where are my people gonna live, where are my workers gonna live? Project like the Fairlifes of the world and the Amazons of the world, they're thinking, if I'm paying X wages, you know, from how far of a catchment area am I drawing my workforce, and where do they live? And our housing inventory is flagging. So, Joe, I'm sorry, you're an important voice in this conversation, so I wanna make sure that you have.
I apologize that I was late, but
That's okay.
I couldn't help, there's nothing I could do.
Can I expand on Anna that thought? So 10%, let me back up. We have one standard pilot agreement that basically every project gets. It's a jobs plus pilot agreement where 90% of new value is abated in year one, and then 10% goes down 80, 70, 60, so on for 9 years. I think what Anna's suggesting is that a study will show us that there may be a different pilot schedule that we should offer to incentivize different types of housing. So let's say there's a certain type of housing that's really in need in Monroe County and there's a financing gap. Can we offer a more generous pilot schedule, or maybe it's a shorter pilot schedule with a higher level of abatement to allow it to get up and running? So that's the more nuanced approach that we're hopeful. I think that having a set aside is a good place to start when you don't have a lot of data behind what you need. But maybe a more involved UTEP, which is our Uniform Tax Exemption Policy, that delineates types of housing, is what we'll learn from a study.
Joe?
And I think we all agreed that that study's important, we need that.
Oh, yes.
Joe?
So is the thought process to go back to 10? Yeah, that's, I wouldn't be in support of that at all. I think that's short-sighted, I think it's ignorant, I think it's not seeing what's going on at all. It makes no sense. You have two problems in this county. You have a property tax problem. Okay? So, which takes a housing problem and makes it worse. So every time you take something off the tax roll, you make that problem worse. There's no way around it. This county gave millions of dollars in tax abatement to Bob Morgan. Great guy, great developer. And he will tell you that every one of those projects, without COMIDA, he would have built them anyway. And they would have been profitable anyway. The projects that you have a problem with are what we discussed, Section 8. And when you do that study, and I think we should do this study, and where are we at with that? Is it the
That's
order?
what we're gonna talk about it today.
That's part two of this
Yeah, we are
conversation.
gonna take that up.
So, I think we get this study, we look at the data, I'm confident that that data's gonna show that you have an affordable housing problem. Not just blue collar housing, I mean affordable housing. And the reason developers like Bob, who did affordable housing, who got away from affordable housing, because if he could get a pilot and get a tax abatement on something that's not affordable, he'd have to be the biggest fool in the world. So that's why all of those projects, and I can name 4 of them right now that got developed, that should be on the tax rolls, that would help the tax base, lower the tax rate, increase the tax base, lower the tax rate. So every time you give something, we have to be cognizant of what does it do for that 10-year window. And a 10-year window is a long time. What does it do, especially when there's another project behind it that, right, I mean, there's inflation that goes along with it, and every time you offset that, you're just causing an economic problem. So, and I know firsthand, because people try to sell affordable housing projects. So if somebody tries to sell me a standard, let's not even call it like something in Pittsburgh, which is completely ridiculous, which would probably trade at a 4 cap, 5 cap with interest rates the way they are now. If somebody brings a blue collar project, it would probably trade around maybe a 7.5, 8 cap. If someone brings affordable, they struggle to trade them at a 12 because they're not as profitable. They're labor intensive. They're problematic. You know what I mean? There's rent fixes in place. You can't raise rent. It's very, very difficult. Hard to evict people. It's just not easy. But that's the hole that we have here. So, it's interesting. So DeMarzo's project in Pittsburgh.
Yes.
Has anybody driven by down there recently?
Of course, go there every day.
Okay, so you see the house that's there, it's got a rental agent in it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's becoming housing. Is
Yeah.
that the one?
What is it?
It's becoming housing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So, that project's gonna get developed.
So DeMarzo's projects, it's happening.
It's 100% it's gonna happen.
Good.
Whether they do it or
Someone else does.
they trade it, it's gonna happen. There's apartments in Penfield. You know that big project going in Penfield?
Mm-hmm.
Spoletta's building it?
Mhm.
There's 300 plus units there, right?
So,
Wait, let me finish my thought. 300 plus units there. Originally, that was not gonna get developed unless they got a tax abatement. It's almost done.
did they come here?
It's almost done.
Did
They
come?
didn't come.
Okay, all right.
We ended up changing it to 10%.
Okay.
And they thought, the bank said to them, well, if it's affordable, it changes your mortgage. So they're like, okay, well, we won't do that. Because without the mortgage, they're done. So project's being built. Then it's gonna be very profitable, and there's gonna be 300 new units. So I put to you, and I think we should look at the study, I put to you that the standard housing in this county, the market will take care of itself. The more holes in the market, developers will go there because it's gonna demand high rent. Places that are not getting developed, which is Section 8, affordable, senior affordable, huge problem.
Why look at me and say senior?
I was looking at myself.
You pointed at me, say senior. Come on, all right.
That's where our hole is. And that's where we should be focused on.
So Joe, many great examples. My only question, and what I talked about earlier, is the process and the structure. And I said, I talked back in June, I said, before we make a change, why don't we do the study first and use that for the basis of changing?
Right.
And that's what I said.
Yeah.
So now we're back here and we wanna look at going from from 20 back down to 10. I mean, I think it's good to have data to back up your decisions.
Yeah.
And I've done it, I know you do it, but I've done it for years, and I've had to go in front of legislative bodies and get support for making decisions that are gonna impact tens of millions of dollars and whole populace.
Right.
So, that's the only thing that I said. And before you got here, I said, are we tickled or what? Because we sat here and we talked about this back in June, and I said, why are we doing it now? Why don't we wait until we get the study? And that's my thing. If the study supports what you say or what whomever says, we go with that study, and we go out there and we do it that way. Now, you guys are getting harangued by different folks saying that you need 10%, they need 10% to make these things work. So, no. Where do we go from here? I mean, are we at a point where we just don't do housing because they're not happening? You say it will happen, they're saying it won't happen. Where are we at? We're in the middle, we're at a point of,
Well,
Impasse, right.
well, I think you take a ride out to Penfield and there's 300 apartments being built that are standard market that we haven't touched.
That's phase one.
It's phase one.
We did meet with the developer. There are several more phases that they're not able to move forward on.
Right.
And the developers changed.
So are those some of the ones that
The
are
developer
included
changed?
with what Anna just was telling us? before?
Right?
Yes.
Who's the
Were those,
developer
Yes.
now?
were those some of the same projects?
Yes.
Whitestone.
Spoletas?
I have a list here.
I don't know
I
if the original developer is still
We
involved.
also, and I
I don't know
could,
that.
this is more of a question than a statement, maybe it's both. We don't know what the financing stack looks like on projects that we're not involved in. They might be receiving Fannie Mae or Freddie mortgages, which are government subsidized interest rates. So while we may not be the government entity involved, there still may be a government entity involved. So to say that projects that are moving forward aren't receiving some kind of government offset, we just don't know.
Well, no, of course not.
And there are some
But-
developers that don't have deep pockets, the same
And have
deep
the-
pockets that.
so like that
Bob Morgan
project-
might have.
Well, Bob Morgan was part owner of that project in Penfield. So that I know for sure. The only reason I know is because they tried to sell it to me. So I knew that for sure.
Right.
So, and I can tell you that if there's a government mortgage involved,
Right,
which a lot of them have,
yeah, they do.
it doesn't increase everybody in the county's property taxes. It doesn't hurt that.
And to be
So-
clear, this policy as presented today would apply if there's a pilot agreement. We had expanded the scope to apply to mortgage and sales tax as well. And so we're saying this would just apply if you're getting a pilot agreement. You would be required to do the set aside, clawback, recapture, would all be limited to your pilot benefits. But if you come to us with a housing project and you're not entertaining a pilot, you're gonna stay on the tax rolls, you can go ahead with mortgage and sales tax without complying with the set aside. That would be that's the other trade-off. So I just wanted to point that out, because I know that was an important
Yeah.
distinction for you at one
Well,
point, I don't know if it still is.
So let me say this to you. And I know I was late, I apologize for that.
We're so happy you're here.
Yeah, you
how-
can
And
be here,
live,
right?
live with us, I'm live with us.
I didn't even know this was gonna come up today. So, I didn't know. So I knew we were, the last time Jay was here, we changed it to 20%. We were waiting for a study, and that's the last I knew of it. Which seemed like the prudent thing to do, made sense, let's wait for the study, and then make changes once we get a study.
Necessary.
And see what we have.
And that's when we found out that they were backlogging
So
in the county executive's office, like, what are you doing here? These big projects, 700 units, $250 million, capital investment, 1,000 construction jobs. What's going on here?
I was, right, and it's not, I am not trying to set a tone as the executive director of COMIDA that we're a fickle agency. I was
I didn't say,
right, no, but you're,
maybe I should
you're
use
right
another
to point
term.
that
That's the
out.
worst thing that happens if you're lucky.
That we're vacillating, or that we're not,
Well, it looks like you're not operating with a steady hand to me.
right, but that's because,
From the
so,
outside looking in.
rewinding back to June, staff recommended that we hold the policy steady where it was as
Until we
we
got a study.
awaited the outcome of a data-driven, informed study, as has been the practice for other IDAs throughout the state that do have cogent housing policies with accompanying pilot structures that make sense. So beyond, like this would entail revisiting COMIDA's uniform tax exemption policy. Our vice chair at the time and the chair of governance pushed back on that recommendation, saying that no, because we've had all of these housing projects come to us and move forward under 10%, let's ratchet it up as we await the outcome. And so then the reaction to that change from the business community, the developer community was critical of COMIDA and of the administration, and I received criticism and questions from folks in the community as well as from the county executive. The county executive reached out to the chair. You had met with the county executive as well. You know, so the question became, what are we trying to accomplish here? Because yes, we don't want to inadvertently, you know, use our powers to enrich already wealthy developers, and you know, our incentives don't exist to incentivize projects that would move forward otherwise. That's not our intent. But our intent is to we don't want to inadvertently mitigate new units of housing from getting developed. We understand that we apparently are, and we're signaling to the community that we're not open for business as it pertains to housing projects. So I want to dial back the changes that we made in the summertime as we await the outcome of a study, which could take a handful of months. And then the study could provide us with a nuanced set of recommendations around, because we can't, when it comes to Section 8, that's not our swim lane, right? We want to know where does COMIDA sit? Like,
That should be your swim lane.
it should be, but those types of
We're so
projects don't
limited
come
in
to
what
us,
we
we're so
can do.
limited.
And the reason it's not been anybody's swim lane is because you could come in and you can get a pilot on a standard project, so why would you even entertain Section 8? Most Section 8 projects that are done have some kind of benefits behind them.
Right, but we're also making a lot of assumptions when we have those conversations, and staff needs some robust guidance, data-driven analysis
Yeah.
that says, here's what should go into a housing policy for Monroe County's Industrial Development Agency, given what's going on right now in 2024, 2025, with the projects that you have in your pipeline, with, you know, your current demographics. We need guidance, because what we understand now is that we are holding up projects, including second or third phases of this project in Penfield. I don't know, because I know we're in public session, Rachel, and
Yes.
we have examples of projects that.
Yeah, we have examples, we don't have applications, we have, Anna mentioned what the numbers are behind the 5. This is 4 different developers, all operating in different, categories of housing, I guess. They don't all tend to be in one market, and they're spread across the county from the west side to the east side, is what we know.
So I'll tell you, I don't, when it comes to housing, a lot of things that go on here, I can't make judgment on based off of knowledge, firsthand knowledge. When it comes to housing, everything that I've ever recommended here was based off of facts that I know. I've looked at Section 8 projects for sale, several of them. I've never seen one for sale that didn't have a tax abatement tied to it, never. And if there wasn't a tax abatement tied to it, they're fairly unprofitable and unmarketable. So, I also am not here to react to developers or political pressure. So that's not why I'm sitting
Nor
here.
should you.
Right, I mean, that's not why I'm sitting here. So, the fact that the county executive or staff is getting pressure from developers does not surprise me, because if I was a developer and I knew I could come in here and do this, why wouldn't I? And why wouldn't I put pressure to do it the way it was before? So I think we'd be making a big mistake backing, because 10% wasn't enough to begin with. But I think we're making a big mistake backing off. A, I think it puts us back to where we were before, which is not where we wanted to be. And B, you don't look like we're a steady-handed board that makes this, you know, we made a decision in June, and now in October, we're gonna unwind that decision because 2 members are off the board. Just doesn't, I don't like the optics
Can I
of that
just
at
add
all.
say something? The reason why staff, one of the reasons why staff was so, to your point, like wanted to keep things consistent while we had the study, is because then we're gonna have different projects on different levels that we
Right.
have to figure out
Based
how we're
on
gonna keep
luck
track
of the
of.
draw of when they applied, so, and Robin has really good data that shows projects going back to 2018.
I think 17,
And
18.
so you see a precipitous drop off in housing projects in that period. We have 1 housing project currently, 2 housing projects currently with the 10% set aside. Now we're gonna have a group of projects potentially in a 20%. Then we've got a housing study.
It could say
that
50% or it could say
different-
0.
So there's also an element of uniformity that we wanna maintain with
Yeah, and that-
people, just the luck
That,
of
that,
when
that,
they
that,
apply.
that just holds no water to me. That makes no sense.
Well, and the
To
other,
make decisions based off of that seems ignorant to me. No disrespect, it just does.
I understand
So
what
if
you're
there's,
saying.
so there was 10%, we're gonna get a study that might hold it at 20%. So there may be not a change. We may get a study that says we shouldn't do any housing that's not affordable. You might get that.
So,
So then,
no
so then
housing
you
at
would
all,
change it
right.
again.
Robin
but that's-
wanted to
Wait.
say something.
go ahead.
I just want to add, there are also projects that do not, affordable projects that have shelter rent pilots through the city or through the host municipality.
And a lot
that
of
do
people
not come through the
think that
IDA.
their pilots are
They're
left
not.
for
So there
them.
are projects getting tax abatements.
So
Not
there's
for
a,
COMIDA.
under
Not for
New York
COMIDA.
State law,
But they're affordable.
they're regulated units, yep, they're
They're
affordable.
affordable.
And they are called Article 11 pilots that can be administered directly through the municipalities, so there are a
what,
number.
I don't understand.
there's a
What's the
timing
correlation?
So
issue.
the point I think we're trying to make with that is that we struggle to get involved in true affordable housing projects because they can go directly to the municipality
Sure.
without coming to us.
And pay
Sure.
nothing.
And so this is also an overall pipeline.
Yeah, and I'm gonna tell you, another big stall for housing nationally has been the Fed fund rate's up 525 basis points in the last 18 months, 2 years. It just dropped 50 basis points.
And should
So,
continue to drop.
So development has stalled nationally. Developers, not only has building stopped, trading has stopped.
Yeah.
Has stopped. Like, it came to a complete halt. So there was projects that I knew that were for sale, that we were looking at to purchase, they pulled them off the market because they couldn't trade them at that number anymore. There were deals we were looking at prior to this rate jump that we just said, no, we're not gonna do it, we're gonna wait. Because I know, and everybody else knows, you don't need a crystal ball or a study for that, is that by the end of the first quarter, rates are probably gonna be down 100 basis points from where they were 2 months ago.
Right.
So it just makes sense, and from a retro perspective. It makes sense to base these decisions on good data from a study.
Right.
And I'm not Monday morning quarterbacking, but I said, why don't we just wait until we get the study before we make these changes? Now, Robin, to your point.
I agree with that.
Robin, to your point, did we have people who had their applications or notified us of their applications in the pipeline before we changed this on the 18th?
One.
Huh?
One.
One. So we changed it while his application's in the pipeline. Are we making them adhere to this number now? So if that person had their application in there already, and if we make them adhere to this number, are we being equitable and fair? And that's the question that I have to ask. I mean, because if they had their application in, we make a change on the 18th, And then we say, guess what? We just changed this, although your application's in, we've been in contact with you, you're gonna have to adhere to this.
I thought there was a group sort of
There
in the
was
pipeline
There
that
was,
we
the
allowed.
directive was, please let them know that we have changed the
Right.
percentage,
Right.
and we did, and we didn't hear from them again.
Could I jump ahead real quick, just to ask, because I know you're gonna talk about it? What are we looking at time-wise for a study?
We are at.
How many months are we talking?
In the draft RFP, we put 6 to 8 months.
Or, do we have to put 6 to 8 months? Can't we say we want it sooner?
We can, but I think we want it to be comprehensive.
We wanna
Well,
look at
that makes
econometric
sense.
And
data.
what, actually,
So if.
we end up going back and forth a lot on studies.
We do.
Get drafts, we mark it up, there's a lot of back and forth.
But why put 6 to 8 months? Why can't you say, what's the soonest you can get the study
The other
to
thought
us?
was us to not put that in the
Right,
RFP, and then
right.
that's one of the criteria that we rate them
Well,
on.
whenever I
It's how
bid
fast they can get it
bid something out, I bid it out, you tell me how fast you can get it
Yeah,
to me, right?
and that's,
Yeah,
yeah,
we've
that's
gone
an
back and forth
option.
a lot.
Yeah,
Well, we don't want a quick and dirty assessment, sloppy data.
of course not.
We want economic modeling. We wanna take into account macroeconomic factors like the
Right.
federal interest rate, and what is that doing to development in the pipeline?
But if you could get a complete study sooner, why would you put 6 to 8 months if you can get one in 3?
Right, I mean,
or
that's
2?
like the, I guess,
So,
maximum amount of time that we're willing to wait, so we could put an up to in there, I don't,
right, so Joe, this has been done before, from, places on the West Coast, Seattle, Oregon, Tennessee.
Westchester just did it.
I'm talking about nationally, this issue,
Yeah.
this issue's up there. So what you wanna do, I know we
You
can.
come in. Hi, Jim. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we, sometimes we just look regionally, sometimes we just look from a state standpoint. I think from what we're doing as we compete with these, national type of firms coming in, we should look at it, what's the best practice, not just for New York, but from a national standpoint. And there's places out there where they, not only do they study our housing trends, but how does our transportation and our infrastructure and everything else that goes with housing, how do they complement each other? And that's the type of comprehensive study that we want to get and use this mechanism. But guess what? To feed it to the ledge and say, ledge, this is what's going on, this is what this study has revealed to us, and we make an informed decision on how we utilize our resources. And that's all I'm saying. We're making informed decisions based on information, because we can build the best darn housing complex or support the best housing complex in the world. But if you don't have roads to get to them, if you don't have the actual infrastructure underground, the plumbing, the electrical, you know that, it's not gonna be helpful. So there's some things out here that we should get out of this study that's gonna be a guiding principle as outlined for how we proceed.
Part of our agenda today.
I'm sorry. Excuse me.
No
oh, it's a good
apology.
segue, you set the stage.
Part of our agenda today for this committee is to issue the RFQ and for the RFP and identify exactly what our needs are. And if you have all looked at that, it talks about the scope of work, which is, as Una said, there's a lot of economic issues there, but demographic analysis, housing, residential development inventory, analysis of barriers to housing development, zoning, policy review, housing trends nationally and statewide, and housing strategies and recommendations. So, and then what the qualifications we believe the firm should have if we were to use have the benefit of their services. But it's a full-on, as Anna said, economic review of housing here, but what's going on elsewhere, so we can make a more informed decision. So if that's the case, we'd like to get this approved today, this committee. And then we do need to make a decision on the 10% versus the 20.
I do wanna
But
point
there's
out
separate issues.
that separate issues, it does say at least 10%, So it's an at least number. We are having the project still come for 2 meetings, so the board would have an opportunity to evaluate the project, ask for additional information, and evaluate what the appropriate set aside would be. There are also at least 2 groups, Camoin and the MRB group, that can do independent analysis of housing. They can look at pro forma information and make a recommendation to assist the board in evaluation of what an appropriate set aside would be
For an individual project.
on an
a
individual project basis. So I don't know if this alleviates any concern for you. It is an at least number.
So you think someone's gonna come in and
No.
offer you more?
No, absolutely
I'm just
not.
wondering.
I'm not
The
stupid.
board has broad discretion.
Joe wants some part of
So,
it.
so,
Yeah.
So going-
Cause Rachel, because if there was a company that could do that,
so.
it wouldn't be me.
No, but I
can
think
tell you
she's saying that you could then say, you could
The
push
board.
back.
You can,
Yeah.
right.
So,
And it's a 2-meeting cycle, so phase 1, you hear about the project.
Yeah.
Meeting 2, you get to push back and propose.
and because of this
Changes,
pickle that we're in the middle of, we can't wait 6 to 8 months for this, for a study.
Yeah,
We can't,
You
that's,
left it out.
Actually,
that's,
it's not in here, I did take it out.
no, but I'm just saying,
Remember
we
which
need to
version?
get this done sooner versus later. I mean, it,
Yeah,
If we
6 to
don't-
8
if
months
it's
just
not
sounds
on
like, it sounds like such a long time to me.
It
Studies
does.
take time.
it is a long time.
It sounds like a long time.
And
for
maybe
a
we
study.
don't do the whole, like Norm, your thoughts about it needs to include all of these things, maybe we,
It doesn't necessarily have to include it, but if you have a really thorough organization, they're gonna come in and they're gonna make those connections for you. They're gonna do that as part of their due diligence. So it's good firms will do that.
and we don't have to make a decision on anything today. We are running out of time, so we can certainly table the discussion. I mean, we wanted to, but there's why. We can wait.
Meanwhile, those applicants are just still sitting there to see what we're gonna do in terms
I didn't
of
get
our
the
own
formal,
policy.
so.
I know you're talking about 2 different things, but here's what I'm hearing. You had a policy in place and you were getting applicants. You changed your policy, now you're not getting applicants. What does that tell you?
And we're hearing that the projects are on hold.
Well, in other words,
Because
right,
of-
I mean,
Because of
you
all-
changed your policy and what was happening has stopped. That,
Right,
So-
and.
That's just in the short term.
And in
That's
the
what-
context of us, when we were on the cusp of changing the policy, or when staff was recommending that we do a study, we recommended at the same time that we hold steady everything that was in the existing policy as we awaited the outcome of the study.
right.
We changed the policy without an informed, data-driven analysis. So we're asking now to dial back a piece of what we enacted in June, while we await the outcome of the study, which hopefully doesn't take 6 to 8 months. And hopefully the study might recommend COMIDA revisit your UTEP, there's types of projects that warrant, a 5-year pilot, versus.
Joe, isn't there some sort of way for us to use, to look at the 10 and 20%, and it'll be depending on what type of project? So we're not stuck, in this pickle, as for COMIDA. I think the study needs to be 2 or 3 months maximum, if that's possible, but we don't want to look like, what was that word you used, Norm? I liked it.
Pickle.
Oh, yeah, pickle.
Tickle the pickle.
Radio station.
So are we saying that we wanna postpone this and not make any?
Just letting you know your
decisions?
options.
Because that just pushes
So we
it
don't
off.
have to vote on it today?
We don't have to vote on the change, but we do, I would like to allow staff to move forward with the
On
issuance of
the
an
study.
RFP.
Yes.
So let's
In the
move
interest of
forward with
time.
that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Makes sense.
So
So is there a motion?
Moved by Rhett,
I second.
seconded
Me.
Norm. Any other, okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
Thank you.
Good. That's a start.
Yeah, it's an important conversation.
And Robin, you can ask them
Yeah.
as soon as you can, right? Okay.
Yeah, and I can actually take a look at the timeline I've created and make it a little more aggressive with getting us responses back in.
Okay.
So that like we're dealing with this in November.
And are you sending it, where are you sending it?
We're gonna do all sorts of things.
Okay.
We're gonna send it to what we know, we're gonna advertise, and we have
Okay.
the New York State Economic Development Council, we always see RFPs out there,
I've got some folks that I,
Okay.
would love that.
That would be great.
okay.
Yeah.
If somebody doesn't, let's say they want, 'cause you mentioned earlier in the meeting, if they wanted sales tax and mortgage tax abatement, that has a much less of an impact
It's so
on
easy to say.
the populace
We
than
were getting
a
ahead, now
property
we're
tax
not.
abatement.
Right.
There's
So,
so much.
is it possible to say, okay, if you come in front of us and you want mortgage and sales tax, you can have a 10% set aside.
Is that articulated in
Yeah,
that
and
policy?
a couple of the applicants said to us in this, well, indirectly
Sure.
to us, cause they didn't come to me or Anna, they went straight across the street. That they would be more than happy to await a study on the pilot, but could they get in for sales and mortgage tax only without the set aside? And then whatever the study comes back with, then
Yeah,
if at that point they wanna go ahead with a pilot, they would come back for that approval. If not, they just go on their merry way with
Yeah,
the project on.
And policy based off what developers are requesting. I think we can't eliminate the set aside at all. I don't think that makes any sense. So if we wanted to, we could look at projects with sales tax and mortgage tax with the 10% set aside the way it was. And if you want a tax abatement, it says 20, and we could leave it at 20. And then when the study comes, we can adjust accordingly and make an intelligent decision on what to do based off of that study. So we could do that, so at least.
We need to rewrite this then.
So it would be,
10% set aside.
right, if you do, I mean, if we wanna continue, so the desire was to make a decision on policy, I'm letting you know, of course, you don't have to do anything. So if we wanna pick up the conversation with some options, depending on what the benefits are applied for, we can convene another governance committee meeting and do that.
I think so.
But
Sure,
we could
we
get
could do
going
that.
on this.
Right,
study.
cause we don't have Lisa today, and so we don't have
Yeah.
a full,
That makes sense.
probably be fair to
That
include
makes
Lisa
sense.
in the
But at
conversation.
least it's food for thought, right?
Right.
So if you wanna get some of the projects going and they're looking for mortgage tax and they're looking for sales tax, maybe there's a way to get them going without continuing to hurt the tax
Right.
base.
And to Rachel's point earlier too, we can engage on a project by project basis with a COMIDA or an MRB group, look at pro formas, and the board has broad discretion in the language of our existing policy to make certain determinations about individual projects. We can pull data on those individual projects by working with an outside firm. So I think that's good to keep in the back of our minds.
Lots of options.
Rachel, would you send out some language, verbiage to us?
Sure.
Within the next few days?
Yeah,
So
some different
maybe
options.
we can do something within the next week or so?
Quickly convene the
Put
group.
together.
We can reconvene, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
do
yeah,
something
yeah.
for
Because,
Anna has a baby.
That's right.
I'm not gonna be in there.
When you leave it?
When the baby comes.
That's the end of October.
Me too. Yeah. I'm not leaving.
All right, so that RFP is gonna be, you're gonna
Yes,
issue
we'll
that,
do
right?
Mhm.
Okay,
And if you take a look and have comments in the next like 24 hours,
Yeah.
okay.
it'll take longer than that.
Motion to adjourn.
Yes.
Second.
Second is that we adjourn the committee meeting. I thank everyone for your diligence in review of our options that are best for the citizens of New York. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.